And I'm going to touch on that because there's certain things just no differently than a daily cadence of accountability with traffic management, inbound lead management. What's the contacts? How many of those convert to an appointment? How many of those show? And then what's the close rate? So we're going to talk about all that. Let me grab my clicker. Is there anything else about service drive acquisition that you want to make sure that we cover that's not on that whiteboard over there? And I'll read it off. Okay. So negative equity. What else? Okay. How to compensate service for taking away their customer pay work. What else? On the service drive? So, okay. Well, if you have a stocking strategy, I guess that's a. I would agree with Frank. If you buy them all, that should be the stocking strategy. And then wholesale. And that's one of the things that we see across the country is that everybody doesn't acquire everything, or they say, well, those don't sell here. We don't sell, finance cars over 100,000 miles or 120,000 miles, or the NADA retail lending guidelines where it's never going to book out. Whereas and the reality is, like in Naples, Florida, a 2007 Solera with less than 50,000 miles is going to sell for $20,000 or more, and it only books out for $7,000. That makes no sense whatsoever. But those customers are going to buy them for their condos, or there's a unique vehicle like that in every market that's just different. It could be minivan somewhere, it could be in Orlando. There's all these different pockets all over the place. But we'll say, which cars should you target? How about that, Paul? What else? And these are great questions. And these. Okay, good point, Brandon. Does everybody else? Does other people agree with that? It's a lot of lift and a lot of work and a lot of horsepower to generate a 1 or 2% return. I love the candor. So, too heavy lift. What else? Yep, I totally agree with that. Yes. Okay, let's talk about that. Another great thing, and I've seen that many times, ruining customer experience, let's say. So I think we've got most of the heavy stuff covered here. Okay, yeah, that's a big one. Staffing and scheduling. Do you do? So, why service drive? Staffing and schedule. So I also look at it like an F&I department. If you don't, how many people have been in the car business, like, or were in the car business prior to 1995? So you remember, it used to be optional, Gary, to go into the finance office, right? Some customers did, some customers didn't. Why didn't you TO that to the finance person? You know they're supposed to talk to everybody. And I know that might sound crazy to everybody now, today, but that's how it was. And I ended up just doing F&I to not have to deal with that, and I just spun my own deals back then because I know how to use a computer. But that same thought process would seem insane today, and it should seem insane to not do kind of what we're talking about, or not try to acquire sight unseen cars, or do all these other things. And I think that the consistency, to Daryl's point, should be as consistent as it is in the F&I department. When Frank's talking about, he's describing how they appraise cars and how they're kneeling down, they're looking, they're turning it on, they're listening for upper engine noise and lower engine noise, and all the training that has to go into these CarMax appraisers in order to be able to do what they do. It sounds to me just like the focus and attention that dealers place on finance departments. And I remember that when all the dealerships I was at, whenever we didn't put that type of emphasis on finance departments, we ran $800 a copy or $700 a copy. And then we got real serious, and there was no deviation from the process. We committed to it, and then we figured out there was enough ROI there to make the difference. And then you started running $1,200 and $1,500. And now all the publics run over $2,000 a copy. And if you're running less than $1,800 a copy, it's like a sacrilegious thing that is no longer acceptable. But it was kind of like a frog in a pot of boiling water. It happened so gradually and slowly that I don't think that everybody realizes how it occurred. And I think that this is, by the end of this presentation, you're gonna look at this the exact same way. And we'll touch on all of this.
I can appraise a vehicle, my other manager can appraise a vehicle, another manager can appraise all the same vehicle. Everybody gives you a different answer. With AccuTrade, it's one answer. The AccuTrade tool is extremely easy to learn. All you have to do is download it, scan the vehicle VIN, take pictures. The app itself gives you all the tools you need to put a value on the car.
We definitely do have more gross profit using AccuTrade. With using the AccuTrade, it allows us to see the actual recon of the car from the very beginning. So there's no surprises when we do trade for the car. It goes into the shop, and then all of a sudden you have a $3,000 or $4,000 surprise waiting for you.
We have 8 dedicated people that go through our service drive. They call people the day before they come in for service and ask them if they're interested in possibly selling their vehicle. We are buying and selling roughly anywhere from 75 to 120 cars a month through the service drive. We haven't been to an auction in over 2 years, so I don't have transport fees, I don't have cleaning fees, I don't have auction fees. I don't have a guy that I have to pay to be at the auction. What you'll find is, with AccuTrade, we're about 30 days ahead of the auctions. We're car dealers. No one trusts us. You can try and adapt and change all you want, but you still have that stigma. Having the transparency of AccuTrade shows that I can very easily print out the form, show it to the customer and say, hey, I'm not saying that your car is not worth more or it's worth less. It's worth this to me, and here's why. And everything is in black and white for them to be able to see it. There's no arguing.
So when we do a printout from AccuTrade, it definitely builds a lot of trust, and it lets them know exactly what I'm seeing and how we're coming to the number that we're showing them. It's made my job so easy.
It doesn't matter where the car is. That's what's so nice about this, is that you don't have to be at the dealership. You can go anywhere. Same as sending the tool to the customer, they can do the appraisal anywhere. At the end of the day, even if you're not comfortable with the offer that it makes, AccuTrade guarantees that they'll buy it from you. There's no reason not to try it. Use the app, every trade, and follow it through. You'll find that it works. There is no question.
If you're not using this, you need this. It's just the best tool that we've had.
So when the Cars Commerce team went over there to go film this spot, I asked them to tone it down. We're talking about Mason and Tony Grenier, because I said, I just want you just to tell them, whatever you really believe, just be unfiltered and just say it as candidly as you can. So they are just that passionate about it, as I was, obviously, to leave my job in retail. But here's one of the main things when you're combining AccuTrade and service drive acquisition. And every single dealership on the top is all the cars, the supply that's coming through your service drive today. How many ROs does your store write per month? Anybody? Does anybody know? A day? Okay, so times 23 working days, you're 2,000. 2,700. Does anybody have more than 2,700? Okay, so I'm going to walk through the math on how you break that down at all of your stores. But regardless, so let's say the 2,700 number is on the top. And on the bottom are all the clients that are looking for those types of cars. They're not looking for your aged inventory that has a bad Carfax and has a 100-day supply with a very low scarcity commodity car, not a gross generator, nothing unique or rare about it, because those cars are either have prospects on them or already sold. So it's the way I looked at it when I was in retail is I already had all these customers, and as Jason Rice is talking about Lot Pop, he's mentioning, well, you've got all these leads that are on all these cars, but most of those cars are sold. Let's say it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of the customers don't have a car that's available attached to it because it was already sold. But there's typically another similar vehicle in your inventory that you could switch them to, and that's all the customers at the bottom. My goal when I was in retail was to find as many of those cars for those people, the most desirable, and people are willing to pay for it. And they'll pay a lot of money, and they'll pay a lot of margin. When Frank was showing that Carvana image a minute ago, $7,000, I know everybody's like, well, $7,000, that's ridiculous, right? But it's $3,500 in the front. It's like $2,000 on the back. And then they're making money from accessories. They're making some money from some inventory recapture and drive time transfers and things like that. So you can poke holes in it, but it's a true $3,500 a copy on the front. And now how are they, without taking in that many trades or without a new car franchise, averaging that PVR with 5% of their cars over 60 days old, and they're turning everything? Well, they focus on a couple things. They focus on under $25,000 cars. They focus on cars that have very low market day supply, and the ones with high market day supply, what do they do with them? Same thing as CarMax. They take them to the auction and wholesale them. So in some months, it's 40, 50%. Now, I don't know what that number should be. When I was at AutoNation, 25% third-party wholesale. If you go, more than that, that's like, sacrilegious, blasphemous. I would say, if you want to determine the best end user on all these cars, you look to see if a car's got a 100-day supply or a 200-day supply. That's probably better for somebody else other than you, and you need to get more cars with a better market day supply. Those cars are going to generate more margin. That's how you generate $3,500 a copy, because you're just getting desirable vehicles. Imagine if all of you in the room didn't buy a single car at the auction. You took all your auction sales out of your PVR and just looked to see what's my true non-auction purchase PVR. It'd probably be close to $3,500 in every single store or more. And that's how they're doing it. They're at 83, Carvana's at 83% consumer acquisition. Most of the people that I work with are at 50% and 50% from the auction or some similar mix because they need inventory. So here's what you can expect today. We're going to cover questions to avoid, because a lot of it's what you should not be doing as much as it is what you should be doing. We covered this down here, ideal approach to clients on the service drive. Paul's question, which used vehicles do you target on the service drive? What are the processes and procedures? What's the role clarity? Who does what? Staffing and scheduling, to Jared's question. And compensation and innovative pay plans. Not just compensation for, who asked the compensation question? Whoever it was. It's not going to just be how much should you pay those people, but also how should you compensate the service advisors or the service manager for taking away their CP work. Scoreboards, daily checkouts, same-day checks. I think that Daryl already covered that. I'll just show you a sample workflow. And then ballpark ranges or actual appraisal values. So we'll end on a high note. To Frank's point. I would post as much stuff about ranges, ballparks, and on social media, Facebook, tag him if you can, just so he can get that immersive experience. So, and I love David. Everybody knows that. But so here's what we do when we're working with a dealer to try to implement and install one of these programs. So first, we've got a service drive acquisition readiness assessment. We ask, how many ROs do you write a month? Of those ROs, similar to the questions that Jason was asking earlier, of the ROs that you write, how many of those do you get appraised? What percentage? And I'll show you the math on this here in a minute. Of the vehicles you appraised, was it you that had 67 menus? Or was it somebody that was over here earlier? So when they were talking about 67 menus, delivered or deals worked off the service drive, the next question that I think Daryl was asking is how many cars you have to appraise in order to get to that end result, because it is just an appraisal game, and I'll talk about that. But we go through and figure out, does everybody know what those metrics are? Because in most cases, I haven't met somebody who does yet. Determine goals and objectives using Service Drive Opportunity Calculator. It's no different than you say, I remember at AutoNation, Brandon, you remember, $2,000 a copy is the price of admission. Like, well, how do you get there? And you have to break it down into incremental bite-sized chunks. You can't, your service contract penetration needs to be 60 to 70%. There has to be a certain desking process. There's a certain amount of reserve, and it's not just one big number. It's like an elephant, you one bite at a time. And then we just go over kind of the overview, which I'll go over here in a minute. Planning, do they have the existing process? Does it have clarity? Is it documented? Can everybody repeat it? Does everybody know what the expectations are? If you go into your dealerships today and ask an F&I manager, what's your F&I target? They know it. If you ask them what's their PVR, they know it, and they know if they're achieving goal or not achieving goal. But we don't do that in this part of the business. Service Drive Acquisition Champion. There has to be a champion that's dedicated to this. That's their area of responsibility. I know not everybody likes when I say this, but there's one throat to choke, and there's one person to hold accountable. So there's one person, especially for the GMs and the dealers in the room, that you can just go to one person and ask them, no different than you did earlier, Gary, when you were asking about where we were. There has to be one point of contact, a champion that owns that knows what's going on, that knows what those metrics are, and whoever is responsible for that daily consistent activity that we talked about here, that there's certain things that have to be done every single day. They need to check out with that person and let them know what's going on to update the scoreboard. Best fit process proposal, so then we come up with here's what we'd recommend. No differently than with a BDC. Some have a round robin, some have a lead bucket, some people take it cradle to grave. It's very similar to that. There's no one size fits all solution. I've tried and tried and tried, and everybody's tried to get me to figure it out. And maybe there is an answer. Maybe one of you will figure it out, but I haven't figured it out yet. And then the commitment. So who's the champion, the prospects, expectations tied to compensation plans. Because there's three things that implement change: people, process, pay plans. In every business, every situation. What are the KPIs? What's the cadence of accountability? Accurate data. And then who's going to guard the process? So resource allocation review, headcount, budget, what technology you're going to use, CRM, email, text, template, cadence, attribution review. How do you make sure that you don't have an internet lead that's also getting counted on that? That affects pay plans. And this is all the things that cause these programs to fail. Because it sounds like it's getting into the weeds. And I'm going into more detail today than I ever have, because I know that a lot of people want to tackle this problem, and nobody wants to ever go this deep as to how do you do that. And to reference this, our old store acquired 143 cars last month off the service drive. Now, 143 cars, very profitable. They don't have to really worry about aging, because cars you acquire off the service drive, they don't age out because they're desirable. They're 30, 40-day supply cars. So you kind of just handle your 60-day aging problem from day one, because you're acquiring cars that everybody wants, that are scarce, that will not age. So it's a multiple thing. You also don't have to worry about mini deals, the commissionable gross, and I'll get into that here in a minute. Role clarity. What are the swim lanes between service and sales? How do you not piss off the service manager because you're converting all their customer pay work into new car deals, driving them insane to where they're trying to block you, and there's this adversarial relationship. And then what are the daily responsibilities of the champion? How will success be measured? Spiffs and pay plans, which I'm going to share. And then alignment and commitment from key stakeholders. So I think for the most part, we're touching on all but one or two. The too heavy of a lift, and we'll handle that. I'm looking forward to that. We'll do that right at the end. So here's the math. So let's use the 2,700. We'll round up to 3,000. So at 3,000 customer pay and warranty repair orders, this is a dealership we work with. Just so you know, I can give you 10 different dealerships that are acquiring 100 to 200 cars a month off the service drive today, using our tool, using this system. Is it easy? No, it's a heavy lift. But I think also David Spizak, when he was showing what's the cost impact of, and you might be a unicorn because I know how you buy inventory and we've worked together before, but the time and energy that even you put into buying all these cars at the auction is labor intensive. It requires late nights, you know, and you're passionate about it, but not everybody wants to stay up till midnight trying to source cars, build CRs, packets to only be able to buy 10% of the cars you bid on simulcast, or your proxies don't get accepted. So 3,000 customer pay and warranty repair orders. The goal should be to appraise 15% of those. Now, when I'm talking about 15%, I'm not talking about we looked at the car and printed out used vehicle condition report and put it on the seat. I'm talking about interactions. If you're going to do that play, you should do 90% of the appraisals, which is still less effective than what I'm describing here. I've never seen more than a 0.8% sales on total ROs using the approach where you just leave or just text them a value. 0.8. 0.8% sales is a percentage of ROs. So 15% should be the appraisal penetration, but I'll talk about the approach here in a minute, but where you're face-to-face interacting with a client, asking them to buy their car, and well, there's going to be a higher percentage of that say they will. It just comes down to a staffing issue. But the goal initially should be 15%. So here's where everything starts to get more difficult. And these numbers on thousands and thousands, and we probably got 20,000 of these appraisals a month of data that we're looking at, maybe more. These percentages ring true. So 15%, top performers go up to 18%, but it's a constant battle to be able to keep up with this because the machine, you start growing your RO count and you have to add more people. So it's like a limitless supply of deals, high gross deals. 20% of the cars you appraise will close. And we see that consistently, 18 to 20%. And that's how you get down to a 3 to 3.5%. And I'll break that down in a minute. 3 to 3.5% sale rate. And it all adds up. The problem is, just like leads, when you're taking inbound leads in the BDC or sales that handle cradle to grave, most of them can't handle more than 75 leads. When you start running this play, they can't handle more than 75 appraisals per associate. So in this example, you need 6 salespeople just doing this. The problem is that they get pulled to go take fresh ups, or they don't want to just do that. Or people, it's kind of like when we didn't have dedicated internet departments or BDCs, and the floor handled the internet and handled everything, and it just didn't have that role clarity focus. It's the same thing here. So you've got to have champion guarding this and make sure that the daily activity is happening. Because if they have multiple revenue streams, they don't have to just make a living off of this. It's no different than having a dedicated internet team, dedicated F&I managers. It's just less focus. So 6 headcount. Here's the other thing. You don't have to go and get experienced, tenured, traditionally what you would staff a car dealership with. It's actually better to get, what we did is we hired everybody from Starbucks, customer service industry. I took a bunch of veterans and I'm like, hey, check this out. If you work the service drive solely, you never have to work past 5 o'clock. You can take every Sunday off and you'll have 2 days off during the week. But this customer is unique and I want to know what their payoff is first. And I don't know, they're paying this. They're never going to put this much money down. Their last interest rate was 2.9%, or their 18 grand flip. Why do I have to call this customer? They're not going to do this. And here's the numbers that we see. 53% of the customers that come in through the drive that transact do not leave in the car the model that they rolled up in. So almost all of them, the more powerful motivating factor is not to get you out of your car. What if I could get you out of your car into another car, keep your payment the same or less with little or no money down? Would you consider that? Right, and then I work the deal with you and I'm going back and forth with the desk and then come back out. Well, I'm at $480 a month. Oh, yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. Then come back out with $860. Well, the interest rates have tripled since you got your last car, and right now those things are really soft, and I need $5,000 down. And like, what was all that same payment, no money down talk? And then all of a sudden, what happens? Your sales staff's like, I'm not talking to those service customers anymore. That's a death wish. Why would I? I'm going to go stand on the point. That's the worst thing in the world. So that approach is like a self-inflicted gunshot wound. I did it for 15 years and it worked. There was times it worked, but it doesn't work today. And what's a more compelling value prop is that people want to get new technology. They want new safety features. They want a different color. I buy my cars from Brandon Bear, and my wife just trades the trade for, whatever. And he calls me up sometimes, hey, right now it's the end of the quarter. I need this deal. I need your trade. Well, I'm not in the market. We're doing this. Well, here's what it is, and and typically you tell me what my trade's worth first, and it's when it's more than what I thought it was, or I'm like, okay, well, I guess figure out what you want to get. No differently than she did in the last one. I had a check engine light. As we plug in the OBD device, I send it to her because she's like, I need to take your car up to Orlando for this volleyball tournament. And looks at it, and I said it's a speed sensor in the back driver's side. It's not a safety issue. It's gonna use speed anyway, so it doesn't matter. So she looks at it. She goes, "Is that what my car's worth on AccuTrade?" I don't know. She'd only had it for like a year. Well, actually, I told her we're not doing anything, and then she called him herself and asked how that would work out. But that's how easy it is he wasn't telling me what my payment was going to be. Obviously, we got to that later. But the way to generate intrigue, it's not to go chasing butterflies with a net. It's to build your own garden. We've talked about this. That attracts the butterflies to you. This is like what CarMax does. This is what like Carvana does. They do big game hunting, and they're just playing a volume game, which all of you can play. But here's the first problem. You can't run the play that I'm describing with a centralized appraisal system. And when I was at Germain Toyota, we could not really get past 350 car appraisals a month. And I couldn't figure out why for a very long time. And I'm like, well, in order to do what we're talking about doing with sight unseen appraisals, and acquiring all these cars, service drive appraisals, we don't have the bandwidth to be able to appraise these cars. And we need 1,000 to 1,200 appraisals a month in order to get to these, 600 car a month numbers that we're trying. We were like 300. And the only way that we were going to grow like that was to appraise a lot more cars. But the pinch point, because you got all the supply, you got all the demand, the pinch point in the middle is the 2 or 3 appraisers that you have. And now I used to say that they were weak, and I've butted heads, and I'd come out at 10 o'clock like a raving lunatic PM. Taki was there because he was typically the focus. And I'm like, we got to appraise more cars. And he's like, dude, I appraised like 27 cars today. I'm like, what else? That's not that hard. And this one was this crazy Tesla and all these off-brand and who knows what. And I'm like, well, how many cars did we sell? How much money did we make? And how many appointments do we have for tomorrow? Because that's all I care about. And so what would happen is that we keep everybody there till midnight, trying to keep up to actually do our job after because we're so busy sawing, we don't have any time to sharpen the blade. Versus a decentralized appraisal system with modern processes where you're enabling a lot more people to do the first 90% of the appraisal. So in a lot of these dealerships, and I'll show you here in a minute, here's the slide. So here's an example of one, and I can show you examples of many, where they're letting all of the salespeople appraise cars. Now this is a scary endeavor but you do that at CarMax, right? You have multiple appraisers, like a lot of appraisers, to be able to acquire 150 cars. And then there's a centralized team for the virtual, because they have confidence that they're going to get executed. Now, here's what was going through my mind when I was a dealer is that and I can tell you that Wendell Hardy, my GSM, definitely was not on board with it. So I said, what are the concerns? Well, how do we know what photos they're going to take? Or we had the OBD scanner just come out. We were piloting it. The impact of color on a pearl white Toyota Sienna Limited versus a purple LE that doesn't have a lot of equipment, it's massive. Or even a Limited that's purple versus pearl white or black. Those cars are going to be worth on a Hyundai 1,000, 2,000 more, especially in Florida. So now at least we know that that's happening every time. And guess what? It wasn't happening with my managers every time. And the other killer, the most expensive thing on this whole screen is tread depth. And that's what we see across the board is so many people not measuring tread depth when that's an average of $309. So if you want to raise your PVR, make sure that you're getting more people to appraise cars. And then when they have more time and they're not all rushing and putting all this stress on the used car managers that also have to make tail light calls, appointment confirmations, no-show calls, one-on-ones, hiring, onboarding, inventory management, approving recon, and the list goes on and on. When you can look at this at scale, these guys have 53 appraisers. And I know we got one dealership that has 90 people appraising cars. One dealership. We got one group that's up in Maryland where the whole company is appraising cars. They're an independent that retails 10,000 cars a year. Independent dealer. Buying them all from consumers. So when you can get that many more appraisals done, that much more accurately, OBD scans, $212, I think, on average, is what that saves. Does it happen every time? No, but like every fifth appraisal, it's 1,000 something. Color makes a big impact, depending on the vehicle. And as you start getting into Mercedes-Benz, it makes a bigger impact, or BMW or Lexus and things like that. But tread depth, overall, all makes all models $309 a copy. So if you want to raise your PVR, what, $550 a copy tomorrow, then just make sure that everybody's measuring the tread depth and make sure that they're all scanning with an OBD, and your PVR just went up $500 a copy. But we, across the board, typically let that gross evaporate. And then you track acquisition rate by person, and then you can turn them on, turn them off, just like with internet leads. But you've also got to be flexible as your process approach. You know, the process that most dealerships use is on the left-hand side here. That's a traditional legacy process, the process that we ran, and that's how it should go. It should, more time at the beginning, building value, less time at the end, but that's typically not how it goes. It's typically upside down. But you'll notice that first you have to select the vehicle, then you take a test drive, then you appraise it in most cases. I know some of you do it differently, and you appraise the car up front, so it's even easier for stores that do that. But regardless of what process you use, on the service drive, if you want it to work, you have to streamline it. Because if you run a big quick service business and you've got a lot of oil changes and a lot of tire rotations and things like that, you do not have the time to sit there and, well, let's go out there and build value and let's build rapport and ask them who they know and all this other stuff. It's about speed and it's about getting to the point and then doing that once you've got their interest, which is what CarMax and Carvana do in different ways. So the greeting, we would like to buy your vehicle. You ask them if that's their vehicle first, and I'll go into more detail on this. Are you open to an offer? And Taki has perfected this. In the back, he's got the hat on that says, just win more trades, baby. Because that's what he does. So then immediately you go into the appraisal. If the customer, well, I'll get into that in a minute, but the customer says how much, then obviously you appraise it. If they say no, we're not going to molest them, for lack of a better word, and keep on trying to push them. Why not? You don't like saving money? You don't want to get it? There's no need for that. It's a constant cultural thing, just like lifetime warranties that never ends. And just like for people saying that I don't want to bother them every single time they come in or they feel like they're getting sold, that's how you prevent that. And you don't assault them every single time they come in. You offer them a service similar to Carvana's Value Tracker, or better yet, Cars Commerce My Garage feature, where they can go in there and get constant updates on what their vehicle's worth at any moment in time. And everybody's doing it. And most of the dealers that say, well, I would never do that in my store, I don't believe in that. I have to tell you that most of you are already doing it anyway with Carfax, because Carfax is sending them out a number that's not guaranteed, that typically is a conflict with other values that they're not going to stand behind, that's based on retail less 10%. So it's already happening. So the faster, just like what Glenn was saying, the faster everybody accepts that that's happening and that change is coming, the easier it's going to be. So how do you approach them? So this is, I think, the hardest thing for dealers to wrap their minds around. I got frustrated with another vendor when I was in retail, and I just, as the people that have worked with me in the past know, sometimes I got a short fuse. I'm like, that, you guys aren't going to use it, we're done. And I would pull the plug on it. I'm not paying for something unless we're getting 80% utilization, even though I think it's the best thing on earth. If you're not using it, then we're done. And then we can revisit it another date. That was a blessing in disguise, because everybody started losing their mind. Well, if we don't know the payoff and we don't know their payments, how are we ever going to work a card? How do we know who to talk to, or which vehicles to select, or what customers to approach based on our stocking strategy, or which customers are the real buyers? I can tell you that they're not just the 11% that have equity. There's a whole 89% of people, a lot of them paid cash or credit unions, that want to buy a car that don't have a loan on it, or they didn't buy the car from you, or they didn't service it with you. That's just an unrealized oil reserve of opportunity. So Taki and I go back and forth A/B testing this all around the country, different stores. This is what we've seen generates the best response of all the different intros, word tracks, whatever you want to call it. Is greet the client, introduce yourself. Would it be okay if I made you an offer on your vehicle while you wait? Right, Taki? So that is the one that gets the best response. If they say no, or not right now, I'm good, no problem. Here's my business card. We're always looking for vehicles like yours for our used vehicle inventory. There's a shortage of those, so whenever you get close to replacing it, make sure you call me first. Peter Bulware Toyota in Tallahassee sells 20 to 30 cars off the people that said no 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 9 months ago, because it's an everyday thing that never ends. Yeah. That's a great question. So what percentage of the people that don't accept the offer come back later? I don't know that answer, but I know that as I see this now for 6 months, 12 months, or 2-3 years, dealers that have been doing it, they're all at 60% or higher of their transactions have a trade-in, whereas they might have been in the 30s or 40s before. So it's not just one thing. It's the repeats, the referrals, it's like a geometric exponential impact on it. Correct. And most of them sit on the sidelines. I just experienced that trying to buy a car from 2 different dealers, and it was too much friction. I don't have the time. I'll deal with it later. I walked into an Ineos dealership that David Spizak was at. I'm like, that shiny looks interesting, whatever. And I'm sitting there with my lay down. But then it got to the trade. Well, it's a Ford Bronco lease. You know how complicated that is and all. And I'm like, you know what? And they're like, hey, what do we need to do? And they kept on lowering the price. And I'm like, I never even asked for it. They're like, what if we did this? What if we did this? I go, just make my problem go away and handle my trade like Brandon does. He's in Kentucky. I'm in Florida. There's a truck that shows up. There's a FedEx. I mean, I still think you should go digital, but it's just as easy with him. And it's like the fastest thing, and the car's gone, and another car shows up, and I don't have to think about it. And I know he's probably making more than he should on me, and I'm not okay with it, but it's I guess so, because I'm still doing business with him. So yeah.
One 7 days later, offers good for 7 days, and we see about 15% come back within 30 days. Like and so we're just looking at, like, if we had someone call that was not service, just say, hey, I saw that you got appraised, just want to see how that went. Did you find, like, is that something you want to do? I'm still thinking about it. And then one more time, it's not a one-off. It's a soft, just warm, like, just want to make sure the experience is good. There's no even conversation about it. How'd the experience go? And if they say, I got more, I got this, okay, if we were able to, then it's a match beat. But we're seeing double-digit numbers of coming back, which, small sample size, but still. I
see the customers just want to make sure you're in the hunt. And if you're close, most of the experience I have, they'll give you the last shot. But were you going to ask them, Sean?
That happens, to keep in touch. You said you're away on the sidelines, so how do you keep on reminding them when they're on the sidelines of that interaction?
Whenever they come in for service. There's more business than you could ever imagine. It's a great question. There's more business. There's such an ocean of opportunity that you don't have time to follow up with those customers, because now all of a sudden it's like getting hit with I was just on Hawaii, these waves. One wave comes in, knocks you down, you get back up. There's another one that just knocks you right back down. And it's like morning rush, afternoon rush. You get a little bit of a breather in the middle, work car deals, deliver a couple cars, and then all of a sudden everybody's coming back. You can't touch them all. I mean, it's like all I see is car deals every time I'm looking in the service drive.
Isn't that what automations are for, though?
Well, you could do, you could do that, but you don't want to bother them either. You don't want to go there too much. You just want them to know that you're there, and if they want to, then they can engage with you. But I think that what also kills salespeople is CRM tasks on the road to nowhere. Of all these, I mean, everywhere I go, there's somebody with 100 tasks that aren't making any of them, and they keep forwarding from day to day, and pretending they're making them, and they're not. Instead of like being able to sift for the gold of who has raised their hand and said, you know what, hey, because on here, we also, the best practice, salespeople or the acquisition specialists put our QR code. We have a QR code generator within AccuTrade. They put that on the back of the business card. Or they put it on the service advisor's desk. So whenever they want it, they know it's everywhere that they could ever imagine. But now they pull that person's card out. And I personally witnessed many of them like a year later. Hey, I don't know if you remember me or not, but I was in for service about a year. I'm finally ready to get rid of my car. I want to know what it's worth. And now they're re-engaging. And what happens is, kind of like that butterfly analogy, building a garden, these salespeople have more business than they know what to do with. And now it's just a matter of how can they follow up with all of them. So let's say they say how much, because they don't ever say yes. It's either no or how much, because they're not going to say, yeah, I'll sell it to you right now. So first thing is they have to verify that they've checked in with a service advisor. That's what causes all the riff, because if that clock hasn't started, they have a hat tag inside on the drive, and all of a sudden that they go on a test drive, they come back, they can't come to terms. Well, is my car ready? They go over there. Oh, was that your customer's car? We're trying to figure that out for an hour. We haven't gotten in the shop yet. And now you've just alienated a customer. And now the service manager says to the GM or the dealer, this program sucks. This is killing our customer satisfaction or CSI. We got to pull the plug on this. Once they say how much, no problem. They make sure they've been checked in. Then they conduct a side-by-side appraisal. Frank talked about how accurate that is. You need to be just as confident in your team's ability that they're going to touch on every single thing like they would at CarMax and do an active appraisal, and then present the used car condition report to the client to review the offer. It's very important not to start selling prematurely. I'd say that's what costs the most problems during one of these transactions, is focusing too much on selling. What are you going to replace it with? The customer's brain isn't ready to receive that. That's why CarMax and Carvana focus on the trade. It's how they generate all their traffic organically. And then it just evolves into a conversation. So of all the stores that we work with, 85% of the cars that the service drive buys replace it with something else at that dealership. So they're going to buy something else anyway, but if you're not answering their question, or if the trade value varies depending on what they're going to buy, it loses all of its authenticity. Now, Sean, there is a closed RO follow-up process with a hyperlink. This is a Toyota dealership in Hollywood, Florida, but we need your blank, blank, blank. We've all seen these before, whatever. This is just an automated thing, but here's the difference with this one. It was a member from the champion of the program, was a member of my team able to provide you with a cash offer for your vehicle. So as a dealer operator, Gary, this is how I used to manage this, because I never knew for sure. Well, yeah, they said they appraised this many cars, and they're doing this, and they're doing that. And there's nobody else, nobody didn't get talked to on the service drive. We touched them all, right? Okay, so I started sending this out for me. And then my phone lit up, so I redirected it to Mason Martindale's cell phone. And he's like, you gotta turn this off, that's insane. I'm like, well, you said there wasn't any more opportunity, so obviously now there is. When you get that fixed, and then that call volume comes down, then I'll fix it. But let me know either way by texting or calling me. So that's the cadence of accountability to make sure that it's happening. It'll happen for week or 10 days or whatever, and then they'll figure it out, and then they'll fix the process. QR codes and UTM tags. So same thing that we're talking about with the business cards. In the drive, we've got dealers that are using it on their TV commercials. They're using it at ballparks and all these different Subway, car washes to get referrals. But the more decentralized and the easier you make it for a client to get it in the customer lounge while they're waiting, anytime anybody's waiting somewhere, somehow, they should be able to get a value for their trade. So now we're coming around turn 4. So scoreboards, how do you measure success? So this is a sample, this is one of our dealers. You'll see at the top, total CP ROs by month on a 12-month rolling. Then what's the service drive appraisals for a target month? So that shows how many they should be appraising which is 15% of the top number, versus how many they actually got to appraise. The third rectangle, if you will, is what's the percentage of the ROs that were appraised? Are you at 15%? And you'll notice that when you're not at 15%, or this store's not at 15%, they also, there's a correlation down below with what their closing ratio is. Now, obviously, you still have to close them, require them, and those are two different activities. But there's a direct correlation. So when you talk about F&I, you're talking about this many products, this many deals, this much reserve, and that type of structure. It's the same way here. If you have that many ROs, that you need to appraise that many service drive cars. That's more cars, double the amount of cars is what that dealership was appraising in the showroom. So when we showed them those numbers, like, wow, that's a lot. We're going to need like 8 people, similar to the Jermaine Toyota video you saw with Mason Martindale earlier. But that's how you get there, and it has to be looked at every day, also by producer on the acquisition team. So, as everybody's been here for all day, and we're about to go down and have cocktails after a quick Q&A. What prevents the dealerships from successfully acquiring used vehicle and service drive? And it's all the things that we talked about here. What about the ones that have no negative equity? Well, they're selling them to CarMax, and they're selling them to Carvana, and they're selling them to somebody. And Frank, at a CarMax, if they have negative equity, what happens? You buy the car and they write a check for the difference. I got so frustrated with this transaction I was trying to do recently. And they're like, well, let me tell you how this works. I don't think you know how leases work. And I'm like, well, I used to be a Lincoln dealer. Well, Ford's, it gets real complicated and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I go, you know what? How about I'll write you a check for whatever the negative, I'll pay it off. So we don't have to talk about this anymore because there was that much friction. But that's what I think people do, consumers do with their negative equity. They got to do something somehow. And it might not be what they want to do, but they're doing it. Same day checks. If anybody wants to take a picture of this, I know that it's like a elusive unicorn or leprechaun. What I found out is here's the biggest hurdle with same day checks. And really it opened my eyes when I saw Daryl Steeds, and we were there late, like at 7 o'clock at night. Some lady comes in, with a 2023 G-Wagon with 1,500 miles on it or something, with a $194,000 AccuTrade bid at the end of the night. And it was like, we're like, hey, buy it. And it all worked out. But I watched them throughout the day, just, hey, got another car, bought another car from a consumer. Hey, here's the check. Here, I need you to sign this check. And I'm like, how? That customer just showed up. Did you guys already know that? No, they just did the paperwork there. I don't know how Daryl does it. So you should pick his brain about that. I know how I did it. And I talked to some of my friends at Sonic and AutoNation, and I asked them, because you can Zelle at AutoNation, they'll Zelle you the money same day, like while you're in the showroom. Right? And it's anything to separate yourself, like everybody's been saying, from the competition. When Daryl was saying it's just a brand differentiator, it's not one thing. It's these many things that you can do. But what I found out is all of the AutoNations and the Sonics and Germains, the same day check process is if they have a preferred lender that they use, like if you have Hyundai of America, or if they're using Bank of America or all the other lenders that you use, they're not going to hang you out to dry. It's the credit union from Fargo, North Dakota or something that you got to worry about. So that would be non-preferred process. And as long as you put that on your website, case closed. You've got disclaimers, you walk them through the process. But as AI search becomes enabled, this is the kind of stuff that is like clickbait for AI-based search, ChatGPT, Google Gemini. If you're not building content to walk people through the steps, like CarMax is, Carvana is, not just from a acquisition standpoint, but as they're building the process on what the customer can expect when they arrive, that's where you have to have the consistency. And then you have to actually stick to it, which is really what nobody wants to do. So one of the other roadblocks is sales managers. I know there's a lot of sales managers in this room. I was a sales manager for a long time. But this is what we had to stop doing at our dealership, and this is what I see in any dealership, and it's another very, very difficult thing to do, is for sales managers to stop asking how much are they currently paying before they put a number on the car. Where do they want to be? Now, it's easy here at 300 South Riverside Plaza to laugh at this stuff, but we've all seen this on a daily basis occurring in dealerships. And really, where do they want to be? What does that have to do with the price of tea in China? I mean, it's a completely irrelevant question. But when you're asking the salespeople, the acquisition specialists, these questions, you're training them on what to ask the next customer. How much money do you think they can put down? I mean, that's a relevant question. Because everybody can put more money down. If you ask any of us, we're going to tell you a lower number. When everybody would ask me, hey, where do you want to be on this car? On this Ineos. I'm like, I don't know. Less than what I'm paying now. Well, how the hell is that going to happen? I don't know. Well, how much money do you want to put down? None. And where do you want it? Well, how long do you want to go? As short as possible on my term? What, do you want like a base model? Well, no, I want as much equipment as I can get. Well, how do you think that's going to happen, Kramer? I don't know. You're just, if you don't like stupid answers, stop asking me stupid questions. What do you hope your monthly payment's going to be? These are actually all the questions that they ask me. What do you hope your payment's going to be? I don't know. How much you owe in your trade? Does that affect the value? Right? I had negative equity because I got somebody rear-ended me, so I knew I was screwed. So I really didn't want to talk about it. Not because I want to tell them what my payoff is, it's because I don't like having negative equity when I'm in the car business. When are they ready to do something? I wasn't ready the last 4 times that he's called me about, hey, I've got this situation, you should consider this, but I did it most of the time same day because it was appealing, started with the trade, worked his way back. How's their credit score on a scale from 1 to 10? Is that when you're supposed to start talking about that? And how much do they think their trade's worth? What does that have that has no value whatsoever. If I thought my trade, I always think my trade's worth $5,000 more than it is, right, Brandon? Or more. And then we eventually meet somewhere in the middle, right? But here's what I see is I'm looking at people greeting customers, and they're still using the word trick that I used to use. You know, if I could trade you out of your car, sell you a new car, keep your payment the same, would you? Could you? And then customers are like, yeah, it's definitely something to consider. And then they go walk and they sit. They say they got to take a call. They go walk around and sit somewhere else in the customer lounge, hoping that they don't get greeted again by 10 more people saying, hey, you know, we need your car. We're going to trade you out. What if we keep your payment the same? And then not do it. And do that to a customer once or twice. Next time they come in, do you think they want to go through that on that Ferris wheel again? Absolutely not. And so not only the customers hate it, the salespeople say, I don't want to do this anymore. So which units, this is going to close it out on all these questions. Which units do you exclude or include? You acquire them all per Frank Knox. He showed you what CarMax is doing and what they've been doing this entire time. And it's the same thing on the service drive. See what I did there, Tuck? So that photo is from Casa Auto Group, the gentleman that acquired that limo. And this is one of those things. Frank says, do you buy everything? Do you buy 100,000-mile limos? Well, at that store they do. And then the guy calls Taki, hey, I have no idea what this thing is worth. I need you guys to put a number on this thing. And the customer trades in 2 cars, buys another car, and has been approached by so many different things. And everybody says, we don't take in limos. Nobody about you to go check to a livery company. Be the full spectrum acquisition source. The exotics, the high line, to where, like Daryl's saying, when employees at another dealership are calling your dealership to sell you their car because they know that you're the strongest buyer. And if anybody wants help with that, that's literally what we do. What's the ideal staffing model? That came up. The ideal staffing model is a dedicated team. And if you say, well, where am I going to find these people? I'm going to talk about that on the last slide next. But the ideal staffing model is to find people that just want to go acquire cars, that don't overthink it, that don't try to architect the deal, that are okay with not everybody saying they're going to sell them their car, and just knowing, just like an internet department where you've got an 85% rejection rate, similar to that with this, and it's not the end of the world. And as soon as they get done with that, you walk up to somebody else and you're just looking to see somebody who wants to engage, instead of going all the way down the sales cycle on somebody who is not interested at all. Flexible scheduling, we've got a bunch of dealers, Peter Boulware Toyota is one of them, 4-day work week for that team. So when they advertise that in the paper, and when I started advertising that in the paper, I never had a problem with staffing ever again. That you can work five days a week from 7 to 4, 8 to 5, and still be in automotive retail, make a good living. You don't have any problems hiring or recruiting. How much expense for a service drive acquisition team? Well, there's none. Because when you're talking about the cost, the spiffs, how do you spiff service advisors? You give them the ticket, the customer pay, instead of letting it go back to the internal team, you pick that RO and give it back to the customer pay person that sold the work and let them get paid on it at internal rate, and case closed. You're paying somebody on it anyway. It's just a matter of just pausing it for a second and making sure you're paying the right person, because if not, they get all frustrated, pissed off, they quit, they say this program sucks, and they don't really understand the root cause of what's actually causing the problem. You might have to hire a sales manager to run it eventually, depending on the size and the scale. But in order to do that, you got to be over 3,000 ROs a month. So there's literally no expense. The spiff, let's say you acquire 100 cars and 85 of them buy another car, but 15 of them don't. Should you pay them $100? That's not enough. But you should pay them, most stores I work with do 300, 500, and then 800 in a tiered program. But as they're doing that, they're charging that to the stock number like they would a transport fee or an auction fee. So it goes to the cost of sale. So in everybody's 20 group, nothing gets out of whack. Compensation as a percentage of gross is still intact. What's the best equity mining software on the service drive? I would challenge you that no equity mining software is the answer. Because if 53% or more in many cases are buying something else, what does it matter what the payment would be on the same model that they probably didn't want during COVID with the color options, or they had to sacrifice on something? You don't need any of that, and and it's unnecessary expense. Versus just appraising every car and take from Frank Knox's playbook that's the answer to the whole damn thing. On 100% of the vehicles, 100% of the clients, 100% of the time, just like in F&I. This is the one I got recently from Germain Toyota on an FJ Cruiser that Hurricane Ian ruined. It was my love and joy of my life, but it's not here anymore. So here's how we'll close this out. This was Taki, you remember this. This was a Labor Day, Memorial Day weekend, Saturday trade walk. Or that night, I don't know what it was, night or the morning or whatever. Black Friday. And that's those are all trade-ins. That's the trade row, quadruple parked. It was 100 and something cars from one day, for a holiday or whatever. When you're able to source cars like that, you don't have to worry about auctions anymore. You don't have to worry about how am I going to source it. My biggest thing is, who am I going to wholesale this to? What auction am I going to run some of these cars at? I got more inventory than I can handle, which is what CarMax and Carvana do. They acquire so many cars that they just wholesale them to all of you. On the numbers that you wouldn't give somebody sight unseen or in the service drive. So keep a compelling scoreboard. We talked about that. Review the lead measures. How many service appointments? This is how the execution plan to actually run the play. Review the lead measures. How many service appointments? Did we appraise 15% today, 15% month to date? Are we tracking on it? Review the lag measures. How many units did we acquire? In the daily checkout, somebody has to ask everybody before they leave, what did you accomplish today? How many cars did you appraise? Why not? Because what happens is they start making really good money and they don't have to work as hard. So it's a constant grind to keep that machine turning. And then ideal candidate. The ideal candidate is like this. When I went to the Disney Institute, they were talking about somebody, bricklayer. So they're walking down and asking everybody, hey, how you doing? What's going on? How are you? And what do you do what do you do here? And everybody's like, oh, I'm just laying bricks, the hot sun, it's brutal, it's painful, I'm just waiting until 5 o'clock so I can get the hell out of here. And then they said, the person at the end, hey, how's it going? What are you doing today? He goes, you know what I'm doing? I'm building a cathedral. And someday people are going to get married here. We'll walk down the aisle. There's going to be funeral processions. There's going to be unbelievable Sunday mass. There's going to be so many different things with families coming together. And I get to be a part of creating it. And if you want to know who do you put on the service drive, the second option. You don't go with the first option, and that's what most people do. So that's my 2 cents. This day's finally over. I appreciate everybody coming from California.